Princess Lyra of Thrylia was unlike any other in her world. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver under the sunlight of her home planet, and her eyes reflected the colors of the endless Thrylian skies. She was young, intelligent, and graceful, and her people had always praised her for her wisdom beyond her years. Yet there was one thing that made her different, and in the eyes of the royal court flawed. Lyra could not have children. The elders whispered it behind her back. The advisors treated her with polite pity. Even her distant relatives looked at her with hidden scorn. In a culture where lineage and heirs meant everything, her infertility was seen as a stain on the royal family's honor. Lyra herself felt the invisible weight of their disappointment every day, though she never let it show. She carried herself with dignity, walked through the crystal corridors of her palace like a queen, even when the laughter of the court echoed in her ears, mocking her silently. Then came the gift, or rather the joke. During the ceremonial gathering meant to celebrate the alliance between Thrylia and Earth, the elders decided to demonstrate their cleverness. "Since Princess Lyra cannot bear children," one of them said with a sly smile, "let us offer her to the humans as a token. Let them see what we do with those who fail their purpose." The council erupted into laughter. The younger nobles clapped politely but secretly giggled. Lyra's heart sank as she realized what they were saying, what they were planning. She, a princess of Thrylia, was being handed over to a human, treated as a toy, a curiosity, a laughing matter. Her throat tightened. Her silver hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to protest, to scream at the council for their cruelty. But the words stuck in her throat. 1,000 times she had been ignored. 1,000 times she had been told she was not enough. And now she would be sent away, far from her home, to be used as someone else's entertainment. The human she was given to was Captain Marcus Hale, a soldier from Earth who had never been to Thrylia before. When the attendants presented her to him, Marcus blinked, unsure what to do. He was used to strange diplomatic rituals, but he had never received a gift quite like this. Lyra stood before him, head bowed, silver hair flowing over her shoulders like liquid moonlight. Her expression was calm, but Marcus sensed the storm beneath. She was hurt, yes, but more than that, she was furious and proud and utterly unyielding. The council nudged Marcus, whispering, "Take her. She is yours now." They laughed again, a sound like breaking glass. Marcus swallowed hard. He was a human, yes, but he had a sense of decency, a sense of fairness. He looked at Lyra, really looked at her, and for the first time he understood something. This was no joke. This was cruelty. Lyra finally lifted her eyes and Marcus met her gaze. There was no fear in her eyes. There was only pain and a quiet burning dignity. It was the kind of gaze that could make someone feel both honored and afraid, as if meeting the strength of a star itself. "I am not yours to give," she said softly, her voice steady. Her accent was strange, musical, and somehow commanding. "I am not a toy. I am a princess of Thrylia, and I will not be humiliated for anyone's amusement." The council froze. Murmurs ran through the crowd. No one had expected her to speak back. Marcus felt a swell of respect for her. He knew then that Lyra was more than the rumor of her infertility. She was more than what others claimed she could not do. She was alive, fierce, and she had a fire within her that no joke, no mockery, no distance from her home could ever extinguish, and so, despite the council's laughter and the whispers of the court, Lyra was handed over to Marcus. But in her heart a quiet promise formed. She would not remain a joke. One day she would show her people and perhaps the universe just how strong she truly was. Earth was nothing like Thrylia. Its skies were duller, its cities clunky, its people loud and messy. To Princess Lyra, every step on the uneven ground felt wrong. The air smelled strange, thick and heavy, unlike the crystal-clear atmosphere of her home. Gravity pressed on her silver limbs in a way that made her feel fragile, almost breakable. She missed the elegance of floating through Thrylia's great halls, the gentle hum of energy that pulsed through the palace walls. Marcus Hale did his best to help her adjust, though he had never encountered someone like Lyra before. He gave her a small room, tidy but simple, with a window that let in sunlight. He brought her food from Earth's markets, trying to guess what she might like. He taught her some words, basic human phrases, and gently corrected her pronunciation when she stumbled. Most importantly, he never treated her as a joke. He never smiled at her pain or mocked her struggles. At first, Lyra kept her distance. She watched him silently, memorizing his movements, his expressions, the way he spoke and laughed. Humans were unpredictable, loud, clumsy, emotional. She had always been taught to control every part of herself, to maintain her dignity. But Marcus's patience and quiet kindness began to break down the walls she had built. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to trust him. Even simple things became lessons in patience and humility. Marcus showed her how to cook with earth ingredients, and she laughed when the food did not taste as it should. He taught her to drive a vehicle, and she screamed in terror when it lurched forward, her silver hair whipping around her face. And yet every time Marcus held her hand steady and warm, reminding her she was not alone. One evening, after a quiet meal, Lyra looked at Marcus across the table. Her eyes were reflective, shadowed with the pain she carried. "I was made a joke," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "My people, they do not see me as a princess, only as a failure." Marcus nodded, understanding more than words could say. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I see you," he said simply. "Not as a failure, not as a joke. You're extraordinary." Lyra blinked, startled. She had heard flattering words before, but they were usually hollow, empty echoes from people who did not truly see her. Marcus's words felt real, warm, like a flame kindling in her chest. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Days turned into weeks. Lyra practiced walking, running, adapting to Earth's gravity. She explored the small town where Marcus lived, marveling at the trees, the animals, the simple homes. She had seen entire cities in her life, but this simple, unpretentious Earth, was strange and beautiful in a different way. At night, she often sat by the window, staring at the stars. They were not like Thrylia's stars, brighter, more vibrant, but they reminded her that the universe was vast, and that she had more to learn, more to see, more to become. Marcus would sometimes join her, leaning silently against the frame, sharing the quiet with her. Slowly, the human and the alien began to understand each other. Marcus learned about Lyra's past, her dreams, and the weight of the crown she carried. Lyra learned that humans, though fragile in body, had an unyielding spirit. Together they discovered a strange, unexpected bond, not as ruler and subject, not as gift and owner, but as equals. And in the quiet moments when the world slept, Lyra began to feel something she never thought possible. Not fear, not loneliness, but a fragile, growing trust. In Marcus Hale, the human who had been given her as a joke, she found someone who saw her as she truly was, whole, capable, and alive. Months passed, and Lyra and Marcus grew closer than either of them had expected. What had begun as awkward politeness slowly became something richer, something neither dared to name at first. They trained together, not in ceremony or diplomacy, but in quiet rooms, open fields, and under the endless night sky. Marcus showed Lyra how to handle human tools, how to defend herself in ways Earth required. Lyra, in return, taught Marcus to see the universe differently, to notice the patterns of the stars, the subtle shifts of wind, and the beauty in moments most humans overlooked. Lyra discovered that humans were far stronger than they appeared. Marcus laughed often, but beneath that humor lay endurance and courage. He had faced wars and loss, yet he still carried kindness in his eyes. Lyra, who had been sheltered in the crystal halls of Thrylia, began to see strength not just as physical might, but as patience, loyalty, and empathy. Evenings became their time. Marcus would light a small fire in the yard outside his modest home, and Lyra would sit beside him, speaking softly of her memories of Thrylia. She described the gardens that glowed under twin moons, the rivers that sang as they flowed over crystal stones, and the halls where the council had whispered her failures. Marcus listened, never interrupting, letting her words fall like rain without judgment. "You see, Marcus," she said one night, "I was expected to fail, to be nothing but a shadow in my own palace, and yet, here I am, with a human who actually sees me." Her voice trembled slightly, though she tried to keep her posture regal. Marcus smiled, reaching out to place his hand over hers. "And I will always see you," he said simply. "Not as a princess, not as a gift, not as anything other than who you are. A person, strong, brave, and remarkable." Lyra looked into his eyes, and for the first time she allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Trust. Trust, and perhaps the beginnings of something warmer, something human. She had always believed that no one could understand her, that no one could ever stand beside her without being swallowed by the weight of her world. But Marcus had done it effortlessly, as if the universe had simply intended for them to meet. Days were filled with small adventures. Lyra discovered the delight of Earth's rain, laughing as it soaked her silver hair. Marcus taught her to swim in the local river, and she squealed with both fear and joy as he held her steady against the current. Even the smallest things, the taste of earth fruit, the sound of children playing, the warmth of sunlight, became new treasures because she shared them with him. And yet, amid the growing laughter and friendship, Lyra carried the memory of her people's mockery. She knew that someday she might have to face Thrylia again, and that the elders would not have forgotten her humiliation. But Marcus gave her courage. He reminded her that she did not need the approval of those who doubted her worth. Strength, he showed her, was not measured by the laughter of others but by the fire within oneself. One night, as the wind whispered through the trees, Lyra finally spoke the words she had kept locked away. "I fear returning to Thrylia," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I fear their scorn, their laughter, and the feeling that I am not enough." Marcus squeezed her hand. "Then we will face it together," he said. "I will not let them define who you are. You are not their failure. You are the one who decides your own path." For the first time in her life, Lyra believed it. She believed that she could be more than the sum of other people's judgments. And as she leaned against Marcus that night, watching the stars above Earth instead of Thrylia, she felt a small, fierce hope bloom within her. Perhaps her story was not one of mockery or shame, but of something greater: trust, friendship, and the kind of bond that could defy worlds. And in that quiet night, beneath alien stars and human skies, Lyra began to understand that the hardest battles were not against enemies or councils, but against fear itself, and that courage, when shared, could become unstoppable. The message arrived on a quiet morning. Lyra was practicing her movements in the small training yard when Marcus's communicator beeped urgently. He frowned as he read the display, and his face grew tense. "Lyra, Thrylia is under attack," he said, his voice low but firm. "A rival faction has invaded. Your city, your family." Lyra froze. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. Images flashed in her mind: her crystal halls, the shimmering rivers, the great palace where she had walked with pride. And now they were in danger. She felt a surge of fear, not for herself but for the people she had once called her own. The council that had mocked her, the citizens who had whispered behind her back, they were all at risk. Her first instinct was to turn away, to flee into the safety Earth offered. But Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and grounding. "You don't have to go alone," he said. "We face this together." Lyra looked at him, uncertainty and fear clashing in her silver eyes. But she also saw determination, unwavering and true. Marcus, a human she had come to trust, was willing to risk everything to stand by her side. And in that moment, Lyra realized that courage was not the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. They prepared immediately. Marcus secured a small ship capable of interstellar travel, and Lyra gathered the few tools she could carry. As they left Earth's atmosphere, she stared at her home planet from a distance, the blue-green sphere shrinking in the void. She felt a pang of longing, of guilt, but also a growing resolve. She would not allow fear or humiliation to define her. The journey through space was treacherous. Storms of cosmic dust and rogue asteroids forced them to maneuver carefully. Lyra learned quickly, adapting to the controls under Marcus's patient guidance. She realized that the same agility and focus she had cultivated on Thrylia could serve her here as well. Her heart, once heavy with doubt, now beat with a clear, sharp purpose. When they arrived at Thrylia, the sight that greeted them was almost unbearable. The city she had loved, the palace she had called home, was burning. Crystal towers that once gleamed under the twin suns were fractured, smoke rising like dark fingers into the sky. Civilians ran in panic, and the rival forces had already established their control over key areas. Lyra's father, the king, looked older than she remembered, his face lined with worry and fear. The council had underestimated her. They assumed she would flee, that the humiliation they had imposed on her would prevent her from acting. They were wrong. Lyra's silver hair glimmered in the smoke as she stood beside Marcus, And in that moment, the enemy could see that she was not the same princess they had once mocked. She was strong, and she was not alone. Together, Lyra and Marcus moved through the city, guiding citizens to safety and defending strategic points. Lyra wielded both her intelligence and her newly honed skills, anticipating enemy moves and countering them. Marcus fought with human ingenuity and bravery, and their teamwork became a force no one expected. As they approached the palace gates, Lyra's emotions surged: anger at the council who had dismissed her, fear for her people, and determination to reclaim her dignity. Marcus caught her hand briefly, a silent reminder that she was not carrying this burden alone. In that grip, Lyra felt a fierce, unyielding power grow within her, one that no council, no enemy, and no past humiliation could ever take away. The battle for Thrylia had begun, and for the first time in her life, Lyra realized that she was not just fighting for survival, she was fighting for respect, for love, and for the chance to define her own legacy. Lyra stood at the gates of the palace, the smoke from the battle curling around her like a cloak. Her silver hair, streaked with soot, caught the dim light, giving her an ethereal glow. Marcus stood beside her, steady and strong, his presence a reminder that she was no longer alone. The people of Thrylia, citizens, soldiers, even members of the council, paused as they saw her. The princess they had once mocked now looked like a leader, a force of nature they could not ignore. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and determination. She remembered the whispers, the laughter, the eyes that had once measured her worth by the children she could not bear. They had thought her weak, fragile, and laughable. But now, standing before them, she felt the full weight of her power. She did not need their approval. She did not need their pity. She needed only to stand for what she believed. "I am not a joke," Lyra's voice rang out across the plaza, steady and commanding. It cut through the noise of the battle and the murmurs of the crowd. "I am a princess of Thrylia. I am not defined by what I cannot do. I am defined by what I choose to do, by the courage I carry, and by the heart I give to those who deserve it." The crowd fell silent. For the first time, they truly looked at her, not as a fragile princess, not as a laughingstock, but as someone who had faced fear, fought alongside allies, and returned stronger than anyone could imagine. Marcus stepped forward, his voice firm and clear. "She is not alone," he said. "Humans, Thrylians, no matter our differences, we can stand together. And this Princess Lyra has shown that strength does not come from birthright alone, but from the courage to act, even when the world doubts you." Lyra's father, the king, appeared at the steps of the palace, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mix of shame and awe. He had underestimated his daughter, dismissed her potential, and allowed the council to mock her. Now standing before him, Lyra felt a wave of emotion, anger, sadness, but also forgiveness. She had grown beyond their judgment. She had become more than their expectations. "I see now," the king whispered, his voice trembling. "You have shown us what it means to be royal, truly royal. Not through airs or ceremonies, but through courage, compassion, and action." Lyra nodded, her chest swelling with pride. The humiliation of the past seemed distant now, replaced by the fire of her triumph. The council, once smug and cruel, bowed their heads, humbled by the reality that they had misjudged her. The people of Thrylia cheered, voices rising in unison, celebrating not only their city's survival but the strength of a princess who refused to be defined by weakness. Marcus took her hand gently, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. He had stood by her when no one else would, and together they had reclaimed what others had tried to take from her: dignity, honor, and respect. Lyra squeezed his hand, feeling warmth and gratitude mingle with her triumph. In the midst of the celebration, Lyra's thoughts turned inward. She had faced fear, humiliation, and doubt, and had emerged stronger. The battles had tested her body and mind, but they had also revealed her true strength, the strength to rise above expectation, to fight for herself and for others, and to trust in the bonds she had chosen, rather than those imposed on her. As she looked out over her city, still smoldering but alive, Lyra realized that the story of the infertile princess was over. She was no longer a figure of pity or laughter. She was a leader, a warrior, and a symbol of hope. And standing beside her, Marcus reminded her that true allies, Those who see your worth and stand with you could change the course of a life, even the course of a galaxy. Lyra raised her head, breathing in the crisp air, and felt something she had never allowed herself before: joy. Not fragile, tentative joy, but a deep, blazing happiness born from courage, love, and triumph. She had returned to Thrillia not as a pawn, not as a joke, but as a princess who had claimed her own destiny. And in that moment, the galaxy seemed to shine a little brighter, as if acknowledging the rise of someone extraordinary. Months had passed since Lyra reclaimed her honor on Thrillia. The city had begun to heal, the crystal towers repaired, and the citizens learning to trust in their princess once more. But for Lyra, the battles of the past had opened something unexpected inside her, a longing for a different kind of life, a life beyond duty and titles. She stood on the observation deck of a shuttle bound for Earth, the planet glowing like a jewel in the darkness of space. Beside her, Marcus adjusted the controls, his hand brushing hers in a quiet, familiar gesture. Lyra looked at him and smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest that she had not felt before. He had been with her through everything: fear, humiliation, battle, and now together they were returning to the place where their bond had begun. Lyra was different now. No longer the fragile princess her council had mocked. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced her worst fears and emerged stronger. Yet beneath that strength was something more tender, more miraculous. She was pregnant. The life growing inside her was proof that even in the face of doubt, of impossibility, hope could flourish. Marcus noticed the change in her immediately. "You're glowing," he said softly, careful not to touch her belly directly. "Not just because of the pregnancy, but because of you. You've become radiant." Lyra laughed softly, a sound that had once been rare, hidden under layers of caution and fear. "Radiant?" she teased. "I suppose even a human can see some truth sometimes." Her eyes sparkled with humor, but beneath it was a quiet gratitude. Marcus had always seen her, not as a joke, not as a princess to be judged, but as a person. Earth welcomed them in silence at first, its cities sprawling below them, unaware of the alien princess among them. Lyra felt a pang of nostalgia for Thrillia, but also relief. Here she could be herself fully, without whispers of judgment or expectation. Here she could live. And with Marcus by her side, she felt safe, protected, and loved in a way she had never known before. Their first days back were filled with quiet joy. Lyra learned to adapt to Earth's rhythms again, walking the streets with Marcus, tasting foods she had missed, and laughing freely. Children in the town stared at her silver hair and luminous eyes, and she bent down to smile at them, offering kindness rather than distance. The experience reminded her that connection could be simple and powerful, sometimes more than crowns or titles. And then came the quiet moments, the evenings when the world slowed. Marcus would read to her, his voice calm and steady, while Lyra rested against him, feeling the small, miraculous movements of the life inside her. She traced her hand lightly across her belly, thinking of the child who was part human, part Thrillian, and completely hers. This child, a symbol of hope, unity, and love, was proof that even what the world deemed impossible could happen. Lyra's thoughts often drifted to Thrillia. Her people had learned humility and respect, and she had forgiven many of those who had mocked her. But she realized that her greatest victory was not the battle she had fought for her city. It was the life she now nurtured, the bond she shared with Marcus, and the knowledge that she could create her own family, in her own way. One evening, Marcus took her hand and looked into her eyes. "We've come so far," he said quietly. "From the day they gave you to me as a joke, to this moment here. I never thought I'd meet someone like you." Lyra smiled, her eyes glistening. "And I never thought I'd find someone who saw me. Really saw me. Someone who made me believe that strength can be gentle and love can be fierce." Together they watched the Earth's sun rise, a new day beginning. Lyra's heart swelled with hope and determination. She had returned, not as a joke, not as a princess defined by others, but as a mother, a partner, and a woman who had claimed her own destiny. The future stretched before them, bright, unshakable, and full of life. And in that moment, Lyra knew one undeniable truth. No force in the universe could diminish the power of love, courage, and choice, and she had both in abundance. Years passed. and Lyra's life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The silver-haired princess who had once been mocked as infertile now walked with a quiet grace as a mother, a leader, and a symbol of hope. Her child, a perfect blend of Thrillian and human, brought light wherever they went. The little one's laughter, bright and innocent, reminded Lyra every day that miracles could happen even in the shadow of doubt. Marcus stood beside her as always, proud and unwavering. Together they had built a life that defied expectations. Earth had become a second home, a place where they were no longer seen as strangers but as a family united by love and courage. Lyra often marveled at how far they had come, from a joke offered by a cruel council to a life filled with hope, laughter, and purpose. The child had Lyra's silver hair and Marcus's bright eyes, a living testament to the unity of two worlds. Lyra would hold them close and whisper stories of Thrillia, of crystal halls and starlit gardens, and of the battles that had shaped her. "One day," she would say softly, "you will understand that strength is not just in what you are given but in what you choose to do. Never let anyone define who you are." Thrillia, too, had changed. Stories of the princess who returned from humiliation and adversity spread across the galaxy. Citizens spoke of her courage, her wisdom, and the love she had found with a human who had seen her worth. The council and even the king now recognized that Lyra's strength had reshaped their world. She had become a living legend, not for her birthright but for the choices she had made and the heart she had shown. Lyra often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the whispers of mockery, the weight of judgment, and the loneliness that had once pressed on her like a heavy stone. But those days no longer held power over her. She had learned that even in the darkest moments, love, courage, and hope could bloom. She had learned that humans and Thrillians, though so different, could share the same values, the same dreams, and the same capacity for compassion. One evening, Lyra stood on a hill overlooking the city where she now lived, holding her child's small hand in hers. Marcus leaned close, his warmth reassuring. "Do you ever miss Thrillia?" he asked gently. Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "I do," she admitted, "but I also see what we've created here. This is our home now, and we've made it something beautiful. Our child will grow knowing that love and courage can cross any boundary, any world, any expectation." Her child giggled and ran a small hand along the grass, their laughter echoing in the quiet evening. Lyra's heart swelled. This small life was more than a victory, it was a legacy. Every struggle, every humiliation, every battle had led to this. She had taken what was meant to shame her and transformed it into hope, unity, and love. Marcus looked at her, pride and tenderness in his eyes. "You've done something incredible, Lyra. Not just for yourself, but for all of us. You've shown that even the smallest spark can light the darkest night." Lyra squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of his words deep in her chest. She had not only survived the cruelty of others, she had thrived. She had built a family, united two worlds, and become a symbol that strength and love were not limited by species, expectation, or fear. And as the stars began to shine over the earth and Thrillia alike, Lyra whispered to her child, "Remember this. Never let anyone tell you who you are. Your strength comes from your heart, and your heart can change everything." The galaxy would remember her story for generations. The princess who had been given away as a joke returned as a mother, a leader, and a force of hope. Her legacy was not in titles or power, but in courage, love, and the unshakable truth that even the smallest, most unlikely spark could light the universe. Lyra looked at her child, at Marcus, at the world they had built together, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely whole. The joke was over. The legend had begun.